Matt Muchagrosso here, creator of Xenoplicity and the queue system it runs on. Today's video, let's talk about traps. Let's talk about traps in your game, whether they're in a forest or whether they're in a dungeon, wherever the player characters happen to be going. What kind of traps should you put in your game and how would you do them? A lot of people offer different advice online, some good, some bad. But here's my take on it, okay? I've heard a lot of people say things like, you should make your traps obvious. I think that's not a trap. That's more of an obstacle, and I kind of make that distinction in my own game, Xenoplicity. The purpose of a trap is to trap the target or the intended victim of said trap. So a trap should not be obvious. That would be defeating the purpose. At that point, it's more of just an obstacle to overcome. So yeah, your player characters, they come to a hallway. There's a large pit that's exposed. There's spikes at the bottom of the pit. So that's not a trap. That's an obstacle. It's something that there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually a really cool thing to put in your game, and that they just have to overcome using ingenuity and creativity, using things that they have on their person, right? Things like that are really good because they foster role play at the table with the players, and also it gets people engaged in the and immersed in the game that's being done at the table. These are all good things. Nothing wrong with that at all. Okay. And in something like that, depending on what kind of idea that the characters come up with in the game, then you may not even involve a roll. You just let the players have that victory and you move on, right? It eats up a little time and maybe to take some resources, but it doesn't necessarily involve a roll. Maybe it does. Maybe there's rolls involved, but maybe there's not. Okay, that's not really a trap though. A trap would be if there was a false floor covering that pit trap, or maybe an illusion that concealed that the trap was there to begin with. The goal of a trap would be to either capture the characters, or alert the occupants of the said dungeon or area that there's someone that's coming into that area, that there's intruders, right? Or maybe just to damage or hurt or even kill them if they fall into said trap. And maybe some combination of all of that, right? So if classic pit trap with spikes, the idea is that if they fall into it, they're trapped, they're not getting out, okay, and or damaged or dead, okay. Where someone has fallen into a pit, they are now effectively trapped or cut off from the rest of the group. If the other characters can see them, if the pit is reasonably sized so where they could still be reached, but just not by hand, then the question becomes, what are you going to do to help out the person that's now trapped at the bottom of this hole, right? And so inevitably this leads to everybody engaging and getting involved in the game. How do we solve this problem? Right? This is why traps are good. They get everybody involved. They get everybody working together. Someone's screaming out, hey, who has rope? And someone else is like, yeah, I don't know, I didn't bring any. And there's always that, who has the rope? Who brought the rope? No one remembers to bring the rope until you're in that situation and you realize, oh no, we really need rope. And I guess what I'm trying to say is like, that's what you want at your table. You want everybody getting engaged and involved and screaming over top of each other and trying to solve the problem in real time at the table, playing off of each other, feeding off of each other. One person has the rope, another person wants to use their strength to hold the rope, and kind of like brace it while you guys try to pull this person out of the hole. Can they get out of the pit? Is it enough rope? Do you have to tie several lengths of rope together? How does this work? Who's holding the torch while all this is going on, right? When you have groups, when you have a group that is all working like this together, everyone's playing a role, everyone's trying to figure out a solution, everyone's trying to add to what's going on, boom, you've got a really great moment in the game. And it's one of those things where people really enjoy, right? So try to do that. Try to foster moments in the game where the characters all have to play off of each other. If you remember from like movies like Return of the Jedi, right? There's that chunk of meat that is hanging in the forest. Chewie sees it. He trips the trap, right? They all get caught in a net. They're hanging from a tree. And so everyone's trying to figure out, what to do. There's some people just throwing out accusations at Chewie, like, oh great, always thinking with your stomach, right? You're gonna have some characters that are just being wise guys and just getting angry and irate that one of the characters tripped a trap. Then you have other characters that are trying to like solve the problem, like, hey, can you reach my lightsaber? I can't reach it, but can you reach it? And then so you got, Han trying to grab Luke's lightsaber so they can cut their way out of the trap. And then you got R2D2 that is over here just pulling out a little saw and he's just cutting through the links without even talking to anyone, right? All of this is happening in real time at the same time. It's chaotic, but it's fun, right? That's what you want out of a trap. That's what you want. You want people to all be engaged and involved. So these are fun moments that really pull people into the immersiveness of the game at the table. That's what you want, okay? And, make it make sense why these traps are even there in the first place, right? Now, is this trap designed specifically for people, or is it designed more for animals that might wander into the layer of tribe or of a people? Maybe that trap is really designed to stop bears and wolves from getting to where the people that live in that area are sleeping, or where they live, right? So if that's the case, then the trap may not be so much lethal as it is just preventing further progression. Okay, a 10-foot or 20-foot trap would be more than sufficient to trap an animal in an area. It may not even have spikes at the bottom. Maybe it's just a hole in the ground, right? That would just designed to trap the animal. And then when the people come back, they can see it and they can just kill the animal with spears from the top. That might be a thing. Maybe they put spikes down there, so where the animal just falls down on top of the spikes and dies, and then they can just go down, recover the meat, and they have supper. If it's designed a trap that's specifically designed to hurt people, then maybe those spikes are covered with bacteria or something. So where if you get cut by any of those spikes, okay, that you become infected, you become sick. Those wounds are going to get infected, and so that's a very more lethal trap, right? My personal take on traps is this: if a trap is hidden, okay, as it normally should be, then unless there's something defective about it, or maybe it's just so old that maybe part of what should have been hidden is now open or revealed. Unless that's the case, and that is the exception, that's not the rule, then the trap is not visible. There's no spotting a trap. I find it weird and odd that so many, and it really comes down to people just not understanding how traps even work. The idea that you could find a trap, that doesn't make any sense. Again, maybe if the trap has been there for a prolonged period of time and it's been neglected or unattended, maybe some of the covering that had covered up the trigger is now removed or has blown away or has been displaced. And so it becomes apparent that, yeah, there's a trap there. It still hasn't been sprung. Maybe that's true, okay, but normally speaking, especially if the trap is being tended to or just set up, it should not be visible. It shouldn't be something where it can even be discovered. You don't want it to be discovered. The whole point is that it's a trap. It wouldn't be a very good trap if it's something that anybody could just walk by and see or notice or avoid just if they looked close enough. That defeats the whole purpose, right? And you might say, well, Matt, yeah, but if there's a tripwire, then if I look close enough, I can see it. Yeah, you could, but most traps are not tripwires. And my point is that if it's a normal trap, it shouldn't even be noticeable. Don't make them noticeable, right? Just don't do that. So the role that is made for a trap has nothing to do with whether you notice it or not. It has to do with whether in the game the characters are doing something that would realistically trigger said trap. So if there is a stone on the floor that if pressed or pressure is applied, that will be the trigger for said trap in a hallway. Then as the characters make their way down the hallway, then the roll just gets made just based on sheer luck whether or not that particular stone gets stepped on. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe as they walk down this hallway, as they pass through, nobody triggers it. But the trap is still armed and it's still there, and you as the game master know that that's true. So then when they go to leave later and they're going back down through that same hallway, you make that roll again to see if on the way out maybe they trigger it when they didn't trigger it initially, right? That can be a thing. Or maybe it's such an obvious trigger that it would always work, right? Maybe that platform that just needs to be pressure applied, maybe that extends across the entire floor, and so when you just reach a certain point in the hallway, you will always trigger the trap. If you, as the game master, know what the trigger is to the trap, then you don't. There's no role that gets made by the player characters to notice it or not notice it. There shouldn't be any kind of active perception or passive perception that might spot it. Forget all that nonsense. You just have the trap happen. Now, maybe there is a reaction roll or some kind of save roll that you can make as characters to avoid falling into said trap, or maybe you can dodge it, or maybe jump out of the way or catch yourself, right? So maybe there's still a chance, an opportunity to avoid the outcome, but that happens then. There's no role prior to that, whether you can just spot it. And really, unless you know it's there, there's no chance of disarming it either, right? So it is not bad to roll for things that are related to traps, right? You might roll for damage, or you might roll for a save to avoid taking damage or falling into a pit. That's fine, but only roll for things that make sense in the narrative. And if something just makes narrative sense to happen, then you just let it happen and you move on, right? So player character, there's a pressure plate there that's going to open up a hole in the ground that people are going to fall into, right? So I roll luck or random chance to determine whether or not they step on that point, that particular stone. The first one in the party does. So when he lands on that spot, I just narrate, okay, yeah, the floor breaks apart beneath your feet and you go tumbling down into it. And maybe I give them a save roll to maybe catch the ledge so they only fall like a couple of feet and then they catch themselves before they actually disappear down into the shaft. Or maybe I don't. Maybe that's not even something that they can do. That's up to me as the game master, depending on what the result of falling into this shaft is, right? If the result is they're separated from the party, but they're going to be taken to another part of the dungeon, then I may not even allow a save roll to catch themselves. I might just say, yeah, you fall into the pit and you go tumbling down this shaft and you break through like an opening. You find yourself in a different part of the dungeon. You have no idea where you're at. You're surrounded. It's dark. You don't have a torch with you because if you had one in your hand, it's went out. What do you, and then they're going to go from there. If the result of falling down that shaft is instant death, then I would give them a save to avoid that, right? So it's save or die. Okay, it depends on what the outcome of said trap is going to be. If they're just going to fall down into a pit and that pit is only 5 feet deep, but it sets off alarms in the keep or in the dungeon, I might give them a save to avoid hitting the alarm. But to still have them just take some auto little damage from spraining their ankle or something. But maybe they can avoid the alarm setting off if they catch themselves right before they hit that bell that's down there or something. It really depends on the circumstance. It depends on the situation and what the point of the trap is. So I guess what I'm trying to say is this: if the point of the trap is death, then yeah, give them a save to avoid that outcome. If the point of the trap is to set off an alarm or for something to happen that cannot be taken back once that has happened, then it makes sense to give them a save. If it's something else like just separating the party or taking a little bit of damage, then just have it auto work, have it auto happen, right? The luck roll you made, whether or not the trap was sprung, that's already giving them a percentage chance, whether it's in their control or not, that they can avoid whatever X is, okay, whatever this is. And if they don't, if they're just not lucky, well then guess what? They're not lucky, and so that's going to happen. Nothing wrong with this. Again, let the world speak for itself. Let things kind of just play out as they're intended to play out. If you leave the trap springing to a chance roll, then that alone means that it's not going to work all the time. It could be very likely that the whole party makes their way down the hallway and never triggers it, and they never know it was there, and that's fine. That's fine. They got lucky. They got really lucky. How good for them. Or maybe they make it all until the very last person in the party is going over that spot, and then they fall into that pit. and now the whole party has to rush back and try to help that person. Or maybe it happens in the middle and it splits the party in two. Some can continue forward and some have to find a different way, or anything in between. But this to me is good trap design. This is what should happen. So when you're dealing with traps, what I think is important is you want to have a trigger. Okay, you need to know what that trigger is, so that way you can make judgment calls on when it should trip. Okay, and when it wouldn't. You need to understand what the trigger of the trap is. The next thing is you need to understand what the trap is intended to do. Is it intended to alert the occupants that there's intruders? Is it intended to trap the person? Is it intended to kill them? Right? Different types of traps for different applications. And so these are things that you need to know. Some traps might have a time limit or a timer on them, right? Maybe like if you take Indiana Jones, for instance, right? They trip the trap, and now the walls or the ceilings are condensing on them. They only have a limited number of minutes before they're crushed, okay, or impaled, right? Or maybe water starts filling the chamber, or maybe sand does. There's only so much time they have to come up with a solution before they're all going to die, right? In this kind of trap, again, I find that the timer will then be basically your tension device. Okay, so at that point, let whatever creative solution they can come up with solve this. It doesn't have to be something you pre-plan or pre-think of. You don't even have to worry about how they're going to get out of it. Just say, okay, cool. The walls are condensing. They're going to crush you in, and then roll a die for it. You've got 3 minutes before you're crushed, before you're dead. Go. And then you just sit back. You can use a real life timer if you want. I've done that before, where I've put on a stopwatch on a clock, or used a little hourglass timer, and say, okay, cool, you've got 2 minutes, and I'm just gonna put that on the table and where everyone can see it, and then I'm just going to sit back and listen to them try to brainstorm and be creative and play off of each other and how they're going to solve it. And it doesn't have to be anything that's really profound. If one or a group of the PCs come up with a really cool way of getting out of the room, or creating a hole in the wall, or maybe stopping the walls from condensing any further, then just cool. That's it. That's all you need. It doesn't have to be this great elaborate plot or plan to stop the trap. Whatever they come up with, if it makes narrative sense, and if it seems reasonable, then just let them have it. The point is to spark creativity at the table, to get everybody engaged, to get everybody tackling this problem together as a whole, as a unit, right? Even to cause tension and strife within the party as they argue and scream at each other because they're all trying different things. This is immersive. This is good. This is what you want at the table in real time, playing out for your group. I know a lot of people, they make comments like how they don't think riddles or puzzles belong in these kind of games. Some players love those, some players don't. I find them to be an extension of this same thing. When you put in a riddle or a puzzle into your game, you're giving all the players at the table the chance to, in character, solve an issue. And again, when you're doing this, it really makes the game come to life. It's one of those things where it really gets everybody immersed. It gets everybody focused on playing the game. And I find that these moments really help gameplay. They really help role play at the table. How do you handle this when you have a player that's not very good at puzzles or riddles, but then the character might be? Well, you could leave it up to a roll to decide this. Just have them roll and say, okay, cool. You know what? They're super smart. They succeeded. This is how many successes they got, or this is what I got on the roll. You tell me, like, how much of it do I figure out from this? That's one way of handling it. Another way you can handle it is you can allow the player to basically get either help from the game master if the player is struggling, but the character would totally be able to know what this is. Maybe they get clues from the game master. Another option would be that you might put caps on what can be done. This gets done actually in a board game that I really like called Mansions of Madness. There are puzzles in the game that have to be solved, and you only get so many moves or chances to solve it based on like the mind stat or the intelligence stat of the character that you're playing, right? So you as the player, maybe you can see the solution and it's going to take 3 moves to solve said puzzle, but your character can only do 2 things. They only get 2 moves this turn just based on their own intellect, right? So there can be a cap on how much you allow to be solved within 1 turn at the table based on the intelligence or wisdom or whatever your game uses. You can do something to that effect, and I found that to work really good in games where I say, okay, well, cool, your character has X number of moves based on how smart they are, or how good they are at things like this. And then you just kind of run with that. And again, the player just gets to solve that in real time at the table, but there's only so much they can do per turn based on who their character is. Or the counter to that would be if it's a super smart character, then maybe they get some automatic successes where you as the game master say, okay, well, it's going to start with 2 pieces already solved of this 3-part piece puzzle, and you just have to do the rest, right? And so again, you can compensate for how smart or how not smart the character is compared to the player. So that's a way to do it in real time at the table if you want them to really solve it. And the other thing would be if you don't want to get into any of that, if that's all in the weeds for you and your table doesn't really appreciate riddles or puzzles, cool. Just have the characters roll for it. Have the players roll those things for their characters, and then just handle it like you would a combat situation. You're not really trying to solve a combat fight at the table. You're just rolling dice to determine whether you hit or fail, and then you're rolling for damage. So you can just roll the dice for whether you can come up with a good idea or not, and then roll for effect for how effective it is, depending on the system that you're using. There's going to either be some kind of like how effective a roll is based on the number of successes or what was rolled, right? Whatever the case may be. But there's ways to handle this in game. There's lots of ways that this can play out at the table. And if you're really taking advantage of this, again, you make the whole world really come to life. And it can be a ton of fun. So you don't rob yourself of this because you're scared that a character might die. Yes, a character might die. If you make a deadly trap and then you're leaving some or part of this to dice, meaning the damage that's dealt or whether the trap is triggered, then any time that you leave it to dice, there's a chance that the ultimate worst outcome could come into play. That's part of the fun of the game. You want that chance to be there, and on the off chance that it does happen, then yeah, that character dies, and they'll make another character, and maybe there's a large group that you can pull another character out of and say, hey, yeah, this guy was one of the NPC followers we had with us. Now he's going to become a main character. You can do things like that, right? That maybe they find someone in a room up ahead, maybe in the next room up ahead, they find someone that's been captured and that's imprisoned that they can set free, and that's going to be the new player character, right? So there's lots of ways that you can bounce back from someone dying in the party on account of a trap, and that's fine, that's good, right? It doesn't mean that player is just out of the game and they don't get to play anymore. They just make another character and then they're introduced into the game as soon as they're ready to. If you do have a character die from account of a trap, don't make that player sit for hours at a time unable to play the game. Because you want to find the perfect opportunity to introduce a new character. That's a bunch of nonsense. You can always come up with some contrived, very simple, very quick way of saying, yeah, okay, now you got another person in the group. They can fall in from the sky. Literally, the ceiling could collapse and an adventurer can fall into the room that the player characters are in, and they can have some wild story of how they got there or what happened to them to bring them here. Maybe a portal just opens up and they get thrown into it. They get thrown into the room because they were magically transported here on accident. Some kind of rift or dimensional shift. Who knows? It doesn't matter. Who cares? The point is that everyone at the table is there to play a game. So if a player has came over for the night and they're there to play the game, then let them play the game. Let them play. There's no reason to make them sit there and just watch everyone else have fun for an extended period of time, right? Don't make them wait 30 minutes or an hour or a couple of hours before you let them join back in the game. Find a solution that's a lot quicker than this. Just get it in, get it done, get it over with. You just throw them into the mix, let them be introduced, and within 5 minutes, No one is even thinking about that anymore. Everyone is just engaged. They've made a new friend. They've got a new ally, whatever, and then you move on. Okay, so just come up with some simple, easy solution that makes narrative sense on some level, and then just a wink and a nod and get on with it. I've never had that be an issue, and you shouldn't either. And I've had characters die in traps on a regular basis, which is why I think this is worth talking about and bringing up. Because if traps are made to be deadly, then there will come times when they're deadly, right? And maybe you can avoid it some of the times, but the point of a deadly trap is that it's intended to kill people. Things like getting sucked out of a starship. Maybe an airlock opens up and you're sucked into the void of space. Well, cool. In the next room up ahead, have someone else be able to join the party. Have an opportunity for that to happen. And it doesn't hurt when you're going to put a trap in that's deadly for you as the game master to think about in the rooms ahead of that trap or around that trap, for there to be an opportunity to come across an NPC of some kind that could be a friendly, because you can use that as little portals, okay, or little entries for inserting a player character. So anyway, guys, these are some thoughts that I had on the subject. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below.